Welcome. Thank you so much, Lee. And it was interesting that the last speaker spoke about have fun, because welcome to Durban in South Africa. And the most important thing to Durbanites is fun.
Yes.
Yes, we will do some LCT as well, but fun, fun, fun all the way.
Yes, most definitely.
So I'm Shoba Rathilal. I'm from the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching at the Durban University of Technology in South Africa. And this is my brother from another mother, Mzwandile Khumalo.
Yes, I am Mzwandile Khumalo, and I'm also from the Durban University of Technology, and I work at the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching.
Yeah, and we're into our 56th hour or 57th hour of the conference. I'm sure people are getting tired, and we're hoping to re-energize everybody. We want to kick off actually, our 2-hour session is made up of 3 activities or 3 streams. And the first one is about our journeys and our aha moments and other revelations. So if I kick off with maybe my journey of LCT, I think we had somewhat of a different experience. Yeah, so once upon a time, many moons ago, I went to curriculum symposium, I think it was at UCT, and I met, the scholars who were researching curriculum and speaking about LCT, and I think I had an incorrect perception or expectation from that symposium. And I thought I was going to learn about how to develop curriculum and all of that, but what it was about sharing of research in curriculum. And I sat there and I thought, what are they talking about? And I was quite irritated, actually. And I thought, these social scientists, and what is this man? You know, he's going on about negative and positive and the Cartesian plane, and he didn't get that there was a 0 on a Cartesian plane. And I just gave up. I said, social science is not my thing. So my first experience of LCT was, yeah, like what the, I mean, I was going to say what the fudge, but after hearing Carl's interview yesterday, I'm going to say what the fuck, like, what was this? So yeah, that was my first interaction. And then I was invited to, thanks to Professor Sue McKenna, who allowed me to attend the doc weeks, or one of the doc weeks at Rhodes University. And then the penny dropped. And then I realized, okay, this is not a mathematical Cartesian plane. And then the possibilities started becoming, more evident. And then I just fell in love. And of course, we couldn't resist bringing Carl to the Durban University of Technology. And his keynote and his workshops were just phenomenal. And the love grew. And there's undying, unconditional love to LCT. But your journey was a little different, hey?
So mine was a little bit different. I fell in love with LCT at the very, very first sight. So the moment I laid my eyes on LCT, and that was it. And to give a little bit of a context to this is I'm working as the student development sort of practitioner. And so when I first got into the job, I was really, there were gaps really, because most of the time, the way that we view student development programs, it kind of has a deficit approach to it. All the time, it's always about what is it that the students don't have, and we always want to intervene there and there. So it's always about the negatives and not necessarily how can we enhance the skills that the students already have? How can we use the skills that students already have for their own success and their own enhanced academic performances? So I was asking myself, the other question I think that became very prominent to me was, how do we make sure that in the way that we are introducing student development initiatives, it's not so much generic, but it also links and supplements the academic or the disciplinary information or knowledges that students are actually interacting with on a daily basis. Because you'd find that if we do maybe a course such as the first year student experience, I'm making an example, you do a course on academic literacies, we have services such as the writing center and everything, but the people who are servicing students, they are not from the same disciplines. And so the way then that those programs are implemented is so much generic, and it doesn't link to the knowledge structures that students are actually interacting with. And so I attended a workshop. It was an extended curriculum workshop, of course, organized internally. And I think Sharon Clarence was presenting on that workshop, and she was talking about the threshold concepts and also talking about the semantic waves and how we can build a curriculum that is cumulative and that allows students to sort of, you know, introduce them, I think, at the first level of study, but then also make sure that there's no going back in terms of the way that they are understanding the knowledge, in terms of the way that they are applying the knowledge, and also in terms of the ways that they will be using the knowledge then in the real life. Because the other key thing is we don't want to produce students who are graduates in whatever courses that they are studying, but we want to really produce professionals. Right? We want to develop a sense of agency. We want to make sure that we nurture their way of being such that it also speaks to what is it actually that the student has studied and their employability and the demand therein in terms of the workplace. And so when I understood and how Sharon was explaining the threshold concept and how she was explaining the semantic way, I just fell in love because I have been looking for this answer, and she was like a godsend someone whom I really and from there I had to really read more about LCT, and I have been using it as well in my own practices as part of student development.
And you know, interestingly, you did share with me at some point as well that you thought about it from your perspective as a student in homeopathy.
Yes. So, you know, when I came to study homeopathy, and I'm going to explain it in a very simple way, when you, like in homeopathy, it's medicine, right? So in the very first 2 or 3 years, you learn about different systems and you learn different modules such as your anatomy, which is about the structures in C2, and you learn about physiology on the functions of those structures, right? But at that level, I could not make that distinction that in one of the modules, I'm actually learning about the structures themselves. So in terms of the innovation, in terms of where it's seated. So if you're talking the heart, you're talking about fourth left to fifth intercostal space and whatsoever really that you're talking about. And that is anatomy. But in physiology, that is when you start to learn about the functions of those structures. And in most cases, you'd find that the two are actually confusing because you're doing the very same systems on both. And when you're answering questions in a test or an exam, you don't know then that, no, in this one, I need to explain it in this particular way. And this is, yes. But then what makes it even more interesting is that by the time you go to third year, fourth year, you now learn pathology. You learn diagnostics. So all these knowledges that you were learning from first year, second year, third year, you need now to apply them to this much more complex sort of module, which is diagnostics or pathology. For me, I think that's when I actually started seeing the revelation. And my lecturer told me that, because I was struggling with diagnostics, and my lecturer told me that, no, go back to your anatomy and your physiology. If you make sure that you understand that very well, then it will be easier for you to understand what diagnostics actually mean, because you are diagnosing the pathology. But if you don't know the normal function of that particular system, then you would not know what is going wrong and where to touch and what to test should you want to respond now to these modules, 4 years later. So I had then to go back to my basics. But Now imagine if I had understood that very well, and the way that I was learning the knowledge is myself now, and me being the knower of the knowledge, it would have made it easier for me to actually cumulatively so move into diagnostics with already an understanding of how to think what could go wrong in a system that is going right? So for students then to make that distinction between, you know, the two, it takes a little bit of agency. It takes a little bit of students actively also participating in their own learning. But, you know, sometimes the active participation can be just that I am interacting in a classroom, but is that really active participation? But active participation is, you know, the sort of de-alienating of the knowledge such that it allows me to interact with it, such that it allows me to be a knower of the knowledge, and then it makes it easier for me to start using the knowledge that I've learned from, you know, the first levels of my study, and when I'm applying it now, you know, at fourth year or later in the years.
So how you might transition that. And for me, that's quite a interesting experience, because a lot of, and you would have heard in the conferences as well, is that a lot of what we've done is sharing about how we might negotiate, for example, a semantic wave in our teaching to encourage the understanding. But you are actually talking about how we might be able to negotiate the waves within our learning and being aware of it as a student. So that's really fascinating. And you did say that this is your first LCT conference, isn't it?
Yes. So this is my very, very first LCT conference, and I'm really excited to be part of this community. I have been part of the community, but Nicodemously so. Okay. For the past 2 years, but I'm really excited to be here.
Great.
Well, I'm not going to say this afternoon because I don't know what time zones there are for other people.
Isn't. Yeah, that's the amazing thing about the conferences. It's all over the place, all over the world, all over the clock, actually. So I've actually been at a couple of LCT conferences. I went to LCT2, in fact, in Australia. It was fun. It was the time I started my PhD journey, actually. And if I said I fell in love with LCT, and I knew it was going to answer all my concerns that I had around numeracy in higher education. And I was responding well to the tools. My cohort facilitators were not impressed with me because they thought that I was attached to a framework rather than, being clear about what my phenomena was. But actually, I could see the link, and I'm glad I stuck with it. But I went to LCT2. At that stage, I was doing my proposal. And Wayne, who is going to speak just now, he said, we planned this presentation based on my proposal. It was very well received. But there was, all these possibilities, and that community showed me that while I was using autonomy, for example, to understand this knowledge, the shifts in the codes, I was using mathematical knowledge, competencies in mathematical knowledge as the sovereign code.
Yes.
And then someone at my presentation said, but hang on, is numeracy knowledge the same as mathematics knowledge? And it's not. I knew it's not, but I was using it. So I was like, okay, there's a light bulb moment there. And then I went to LCT3 and with my best friend, Nalini, right?
Yes.
And we did this presentation, and I was so excited, and was at these workshops, and all these light bulbs were going on. And I spoke to Sarah, and she said, I was saying about the semantic waves, and I was saying, in numeracy, I couldn't see that the gravity and density were working opposite to each other. They were actually working together, like in a worldly code. Shams, do you want to just show that slide with that analysis? And so I went to LCT3, and I was like, fantastic. Now I can show the world that numeracy is actually complex. And it's complex because it's in an elite code. It requires specialized knowledge, and it requires ways of being. So I was really, really fascinated by that. And then I came home and I was like, okay, I'm on my way to my journey. And then I hit one of those, WTF's moments again.
Yes.
And I was like, what the fudge? Because when working with my translation device, I found that, wait, hang on, it's not the elite code. It's actually common sense. And I went into the study because I wanted to show the world that numeracy was complex. And now this damn LCT was showing me that it was actually common sense.
Yeah.
Oh, I was not impressed. I wanted to pull somebody's hair out, but I didn't want to pull my own. It hurts.
I think,
and then Carl doesn't have hair, so I couldn't pull his hair out. Yeah,
I think that's one of the powerful sort of tools that LCT brings to the fore, because what it actually does is it makes, because knowledge should be common sense. The way that we are applying knowledge, it should be on an everyday basis. And because you cannot distinguish between how systems work and the epistemic access they're in. So I'll make an example. If you are crossing a road, it's common sense that you don't have to be a physicist to know and calculate the speed of a car that is approaching, and how much then speed do you have to sort of run at
how quickly you can go across.
You can cross. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So for me, then it's exactly that. We should, and students should have so much access and so much of the application of the knowledges that they are learning, such that it becomes common sense.
Yes, but what you're learning too is that it's different common sense, right? So if you're in the village and you only have tractors going past, then you're not going to estimate 120 k's per hour as common sense. So that's what happened to me. And then so I had to realize, okay, it's common sense, but it's different. If I stand outside, I must feel it's 40 degrees. That's numeracy. If I do this nursing, I must make a clinical judgment that although the mathematics is correct, I shouldn't be giving this dosage to a child. And that's numeracy, So now it's very different sorts of common sense. And what happened was that it allowed me, Wayne and I battled for a while because I was saying it's a specialized common sense. And then what we came to was the sense that it was actually a numeracy sense. So it helped me to go from the dichotomy of numerate and innumerate to numeracy sense, evolving numeracy sense. So I use Gramsci's understanding of common sense, where he speaks about uncoordinated and diffuse practices. And numeracy was very much that. But then I realized, no, wait, hang on. I need to have knowledge of the mathematics, the discipline, the context, and all of this. So there's that specialized knowledge. Then I had to have certain ways of being. And then, I constantly evolve that and have many practices or many opportunities to experience that. And then it becomes common sense.
Yes.
So a homeopath's common sense and my common sense might be slightly different. But also, my aha moment after having this fit and thinking that LCT was sabotaging my PhD, I had this moment that said, hang on, I was actually true, because I was subjective in that I wanted to show the complexities of numeracy. I knew it was complex, but because I had LCT, which was like a framework from which I had to have a translation device, my translation device was true to my data and connecting to the LCT tools. So in that way, I had to see what the data was saying and not actually go on and have this preconceived idea that I kind of just make the data say that, because so the LCT tools allowed me to show the true picture. So that was quite an aha moment for me, hey?
Yes, I think most definitely. And it's really interesting that, you talking more on, your experience, which is really quite exciting. And you're more of a maths person and I'm more of a, the body, the disease and whatsoever. And you're talking about common sense. And I think, again, that's the other, I think, very important sort of ways that we actually become in the process, and how interesting LCT as a tool actually does make the tacit to be more visible for us to be able to see it, such that it really becomes common sense, because yeah, and you also spoke about, you know, common sense in a way that is sort of gradually evolving, because it's also very important that in the ways that, you know, students are learning and the way that we are doing teaching, it actually builds and it allows students to interact and them to advance knowledge, because that's the key thing. We don't want knowledge that is secular, but we want that knowledge that we are exposed to, you know, to start giving us new kinds of knowledges that we may not know. So the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown knowns, because there's certain things that we don't know that we know. So LCT,
I remember Joan Connolly used to often say that, hey, Shabs?
Is it? I didn't just say. So, you know, the moment that we make sense of that and we have that conscious understanding of that, then a tool such as LCT then allows you to sort of evolve in what has become common sense and to make sense of it as well. And then to say, hang on, but there's more to this. Can I advance from this? Because I don't know that I can advance, but I know that there's an opportunity for me to advance this sort of knowledge structure whatsoever. And LCT allows you to do that. I think even with any course for that matter, it be in health sciences, it be in engineering. But I think the case that I want to make then is how in the ways that we are teaching and in the ways that students are learning, we're not only just interacting with the knowledge, but we allow that level of them becoming knowers like ourselves. And that is if we are knowers ourselves, or we are just people who have read the same thing so many times that we have ways to define it and to explain it. But if we were to put it in practice, and if we were to advance it and to make common sense out of it, then it's a little bit difficult for us.
No, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And you know, the great thing for me was that it allowed me to be happy that to go beyond that, you know, you're born with it, you have it or you don't have it. Because, you know, in our country that numeracy, mathematics was used as a tool to oppress the people, or non-access to it was used as a tool. So establishing that it is common sense, but it's a matter of building knowledge, specialized knowledge that includes contextual knowledge, mathematical knowledge, statistical knowledge, disciplinary knowledge, and integrate them in ways that are numeracy based, and then develop the knower, you know, the one that's confident with numbers, the one that appreciates, that's critical, and constantly therefore thereafter evolve. So I think we've had quite fantastic aha moments. So I'm going to hand over to our other Durban colleague, who is from the University of KwaZulu-Natal.
Yes.
Billy, are you there?
Hi,
Billy,
I'm here. Hi.
Hi, Billy. So I'm going to leave it to you to introduce yourself as well and share with us your journey, Billy, and yeah, your wow moments or not so wow moments as a result of LCT. Over to you, Billy.
Okay, hi. Right, so can you everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Billy. Can you put it on presentation mode?
I'm trying. It's resisting me.
It's fine. It is.
No, there we go. There we go. So that's my I think I'm calling it a 5P epistemic wolf in sheep's clothing, or who's afraid of a cultivated knower gaze. And as you can see, I'm continuing the theme here of having unusual ways of looking at curriculum. So what I'm trying to do is imagining a cumulative knowledge and technicality in a cultivated gaze. So this idea occurred to me while experiencing Karen Wolf's amazing keynote presented at LCT3 at WITS. And so this is my crazy aha moment. So I'm trying to ask, is there a cumulative, organized, principled way to develop a curriculum for a text-based humanities discipline that recognizes both the knowery aspects of its cultivated gaze, but it can also take a stance from far enough distance to see that there are knowledgey patterns, trends, techniques, procedures that can be taught. So I'm just going to briefly go through what inspired me to this. I mean, obviously, Karen Wolf and her 5P model of the epistemic codes, and particularly because it's such a user-friendly model of the insights. And it humanizes the knowledge of science, and it's emphasizing those aspects of why we teach something and how we teach something. So, I mean, that's the 5P model. And particularly this idea of the principles, procedures, possibilities, and people. And I wanted to see if there was any way that that would work for a cultivated gaze. The other inspiration was Kathy Luckett's paper, Gazes in a Post-Colony, and it was reflecting on a systematic process for teaching the history and patterns of African philosophy. And I mean, that was using LCT gazes, but it was trying to look beyond latest trends to organize and create a pedagogy and a curriculum for the discipline. So, I mean, there you can see her translation device and how she was trying to organize African philosophy according to the gazes and thinking of ways that you can do a journey and use that to categorize what you were teaching people and not just go straight to Fanon or the latest craze. And then the last inspiration was I tried to work with a reading to learn genre pedagogy, which is a way of teaching curriculum and planning that breaks language, text, and knowledge into clear, teachable, learnable steps. So I'm trying to imagine, is there a way like this teaching and learning cycle that we can use in my discipline? Okay, so actually, we need to go and say, what is my discipline? And my discipline is biblical studies, but I'm looking at this very particular sort of post-colonial cultivated gaze that we've developed within our discipline. It's called the African Contextual Biblical Hermeneutic. And it was developed by my colleagues and my supervisors over the years. But there was a whole lot of basis in this that over the years, since the 1990s, had begun to slip away. And I was thinking of ways to try and bring those back. So I started here with the idea of gazes and what were the sort of messages of gazes. So particularly this idea of things that are higher in subjective relations, stronger in subjective relations are, focusing on the person and the its and culture and identity. But those that had weaker subjective relations were almost focusing on more communitarian. We can do this, we can train you, we can become together. So that was one of the first ideas I had. And this is the way I translated it into the African contextual hermeneutic, looking at the way the born gaze of the church and the home, the way the post-colonial standpoint, and then in the middle, all this traditional ways of doing came together to make a gaze. And then I kind of tried here to translate it into 5P. So what you can see is that in the principles and people, you have those two kind of opposing standpoints, the traditional, harder, strengthened, slightly more ontic perspective, and the other, the much more discursive perspective. But both of those, in a sense, implied in the doctrinal or procedures quadrant, ways of doing and teaching that could actually be taught. And so I wanted to think, how can we kind of expecting our students to move from principles and people through the procedures out to the possibilities. And so how does that become teachable? And that's what I was trying to think. And then I just very briefly thought, could that apply to English studies? Just because there's some, I know some other work around that. So the first was to look at Macken's translation device, Macken Horowitz translation device here, and just think about the way those models of English could map against this, and how a real model of English would not just stick in one, but would move around, and we could have kind of an epistemic journey. And then I also was trying to think about, you can't really see this, but this is from Fiona Jackson's work about trying to look epistemic relations and social relations in terms of a text. And so I was trying to think about that, and I'm going to stop sharing and leave it there. Yeah, people can comment to me what this it's quite a off the wall idea, but people can let me know what they think about it. Oh.
Thank you, Billy. That's
oh, stop share. I hit the wrong thing. Sorry. There we go.
Fantastic. Thank you, Billy. That's so interesting, and it's so evident that we get to learn from others working in LCT as well, and then able to play around with it and see how it suits our disciplines and our work and our practices, basically. And I think it's very interesting. As you say, it's off the wall, but that's the whole point, right? Is for that innovation and that creativity, and then to allow ourselves or to subject it to the rigor and the rationality, I suppose, experimentation of the research, and of us holding on whether it works or not, as much as the idea was stimulating and interesting. So I found that very, very interesting. Colleagues, as Billy said, please do also share with us, you're welcome to give us comments in the chat, or also just raise your hands. Karen, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Karen definitely has her hand raised. I was like gobsmacked. Billy, I am so pleased. We've had this kind of still the sciences humanities divide, even in the LCT space. With some of you who might have been there yesterday will have seen, there are a whole lot of us really working in unpacking the STEM knowledge space with these different tools in different ways. But as Shoba, you guys were talking about earlier, that moment, that light bulb moment, and the notion of enabling epistemic access to such an extent that it feels like common sense. For me, that's what the epistemic plane was. And that whole thing of making it accessible to the people that I worked with who don't want to be frightened by the scholarship of teaching and learning and all these terms, you know, so translating the epistemic plane into principles and procedures, possibilities and people kind of thing was just such a common sense thing for me once I started looking at my data. And I'm so excited to see how you've translated it and how you can shift that into your space. I just think so. It's just a really positive comment from my side saying it's fantastic to see it moving in that space. And ironically, I just wanted to add, Kathy Luckett was my master's supervisor. So I have no doubt in terms of, you know, and thank you for the saying that we in some way inspired you. It makes sense that Kathy is there because that's what she was to me as well in opening this way in the postgrad space. So just a comment. Very excited to see where it's going.
Thank you so much. I've been so nervous about this for so long. And well, yeah, we share Kathy as a supervisor. She was my master's supervisor.
Me too.
Yeah, so yeah, I can kind of relax now.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Great
You're on the right track.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Karen, you do inspire, and I specifically remember your comments at the LCT2 conference and the LCT3 conference. So yes, you do inspire a lot in your work. Going into new fields and new disciplines is very exciting. I'm going to also ask my supervisor to share his journey and maybe aha moments. He's managed to do the impossible. He's the single man that has been able to tolerate me for 5 full years and see that PhD to its completion. So Wayne, are you in the room?
Yep, I think so. Can you see me?
We can't hear you, Wayne.
Can you hear me? Because I can see it's transcribing and I'm not on mute. So I'm assuming it's working off my phone.
Yeah, we can hear you now, Wayne. Go ahead.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, Shoba. It was certainly, you made it a lot more easy than you actually are letting it out to be. You're a superb student. Okay, so to say,
I will send that 1,000 rand to you. Thank you.
And then to also say that LCT really helped with your thesis in terms of thinking through numeracy issues in terms of that, and it's a really helpful tool. So I just want to briefly chat about how we currently using some of LCT to understand the TVET pedagogy space. We've been involved recently in analyzing a whole bunch of online videos which have been done for the COVID times, where basically DHET went and recorded a whole bunch of videos across all the colleges of the country and across all the different subjects, and then put them online. So there's a couple of hundred TVET lectures which are available for analysis. Basically what we've done is we've been analyzing them for about a year. And I'd like to just briefly say what are some of the patterns we've started to find emerging, which can enable us to start to talk about what that kind of space looks like in terms of the way teaching happens. To firstly say that it's very clear that it works with the kind of, I'd call them ontological relations. So there's a very strong emphasis on part whole. This is a part and this is a part, and together it makes up this whole. Huge amounts of that. The second one, there's a lot of type token relations. So you've got a token, in other words, an example of something, and then it builds up.
Is it our signal?
Is the signal bad? Is that better?
When you seem to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. Yeah, it is breaking off and coming back, but go ahead, we can hear you now.
I think not for everybody, Wayne. It's fine from my side.
Oh, okay,
cool.
so it's probably my signal. Okay. Go ahead.
I don't want to get any closer to the friggin' screen. So there's very distinct. So there's those type token relations, part whole. You also get very much a structure function story. So this is what the thing is, and then this is what it does. And you then get very much causal relations where they explain why something does what it does and what the mechanisms are of it. And really, as you go through the lectures, what you start to find is that those are the dominant kinds of moves that are made. So you really are talking about semantic density and semantic gravity there in some ways. Although my own personal preference is to break out of the LCT zone and work with, like, for example, if you're working with part whole, I prefer to talk about merology, for example, because that would connect to a whole international world that studies part whole relations in their extreme logical form. But definitely in terms of my students, they're finding the use of LCT to try to get a grasp of these basic relations very useful. And it's enabling us to now kind of get to some archetypal pedagogies of what's sitting behind that TVET space. Granted, it's online, but they definitely do work with theoretical lectures and practical lectures, which were recorded. So we're starting to get a handle on it, and it's fascinating. So just to give a couple of archetypes which are very clear. One of them is, what happens is the guy comes up and he's working on the board, and then he starts by filling out a very simple kind of either equation or some kind of thing which is filled out in a part of the board. And then they fill the next block, they fill it up with something, and then the third block, and then the fourth block. By the end of the lecture, what you have is you have this whole board, and it looks very impressive. It looks like such complex work has been done. But as you're tracking it through in the lecture, really, they're never moving beyond a very simple statement of an example and a part and how it relates to something else, with very simple logical relations and, or, if, then, and very simple arithmetic relations, addition, subtraction, and multiplication. And there's obviously reasons for that being the kind of default mode of pedagogy that we're seeing in that online TVET space. And really the project is now to understand it in its intricacy, so that we don't land up doing what we did with Curriculum 2005 in school education, where we just produce, we make a recommendation for how to transform TVET pedagogy in ways which don't take seriously what the existing practices are currently on the ground, with very good lecturers doing very good work. But if you had to look at it with a lens which wasn't, it would be very easy to look at it with a critical lens and go, these guys are copying the curriculum, they are boring, they are not showing the critical relations. There's all sorts of things you can be critical about, but actually there's a very solid and experiential type of pedagogy that sits embedded in our TVET space. And that's basically where one of the projects that I'm involved in at the moment is working, and LCT is helping.
Thank you so much, Wayne. Actually, one of the, or two of the things I was very confident about or arrogant about when I started the PhD journey was, one, that Wayne was going to be my supervisor, non-negotiable, and that LCT was going to be my framework, non-negotiable. So yeah, it's very interesting work also happening in the TVET colleges. Thank you for sharing, Wayne. And colleagues, please share your comments, or are there any questions? You're welcome to raise it, and Wayne will also pick it up in the discussion just now. I'm going to also ask my colleague Gita Mistri from DUT if she'd like to share her experience and her journey with LCT, and you know, whether it was love at first sight or tool of need, or however she experienced LCT. Over to you, Gita.
Thanks, Shoba. Can you hear me? If you
Yes,
could
we
just
can.
quickly, put on the PowerPoint slide for me, please.
Thanks. Yes, go ahead, Gita. Can you see it? We're sharing it.
Thanks so much. So I'm Gita, and I'd like to start by thanking Shoba and Lee for drawing me out of a hibernation of sorts by asking me to share with you my LCT Aha Moments albeit a few years back. Basically, LCT provided me with moments of real excitement during my data analysis. The discovery, I must add, was not so much in seeking new landscapes, so borrowing from Marcel Proust, but in having new eyes and perhaps a new mindset. So how did this happen? Well, as a member of the team focused on the meaningful integration of digital technologies at DUT, I looked at the trends in our participation statistics, and I wondered particularly about the choices that academics make with regard to their participation or non-participation in learning technologies related academic staff development activities. And this became the focus of my doctoral study, in which I used Margaret Archer's social realist theory as an explanatory framework, and LCT, the specialization dimension, as an additional analytical lens to bring theory and data into genuine conversation, to quote Carl. And this enabled a fine-grained analysis of the significant patterns of academic preferences with regard to academic professional development. And of course, this was done in the hope that if we understand what underlies a certain course of events, and again, I'm borrowing from Denmark, that we can intervene and direct our future interventions and courses and events if we can help them, or if we can help to correspond them better with our intentions and purposes and the needs of people in academia in various ways. So that was the general thinking behind it. Using specialization, I focused on the knowledge structures of programs, so stronger and weaker epistemic relations and stronger and weaker social relations, and what it was generally that each group held as valuable and credible to understand what properties must exist for the learning technology professional development program to hold value for that particular group. And of course, to earn legitimacy in that particular group, in that particular discipline. So a key question next was whether the design of the digital technology-focused academic professional development programs recognized and acknowledged the organizing principles underlying the practice of the range of academic disciplines. Shubs, the next slide, please. So in enacting specialization, this enabled me to juxtapose the legitimizing claims of the digital technology-focused academic professional development program on the one side against the legitimizing claims of the different disciplines. And I've given two examples there to understand the varying perceptions of academic professional development at DUT and to identify the degrees of code match and code clash. So very briefly, in analyzing the data, juxtaposing the legitimizing claims of the academic programs taught by the participants in my study, so I was limited by that particular group, against the two academic professional development programs, that is the knowledge code dominant software familiarization training program, and then the Noah code dominant and pedagogy focused academic professional development program. And what I found was that faculty programs with a knowledge code match with the software familiarization training and Noah code clash with the pedagogy focused programs were largely, not all, but largely those with the natural sciences orientation. And faculty programs with the Noah code match with the pedagogy focused APD programs or academic professional development programs, and a Noah code clash with the software familiarization training were largely from the human sciences orientation. So at first, this seemed to point towards the dichotomy reminiscent of the two cultures debate, and we've all been speaking about this in the past few days. And so, and also building on Bernstein's concepts of horizontal and hierarchical knowledge structures, I wondered, could the design of the APD programs be the cause of the participation or even non-participation by academics in particular disciplines? So LCT brought to the fore the possibility that in academic professional development for faculties, where different modalities of legitimation codes come into contact, there are likely to be code clashes should there be fundamentally contrasting views about legitimacy as defined in the dominant code. And on the other hand, a code match is also possible where the bases for achievements are common between the fields and the disciplines. Next slide, Shubs, the last one. So it seemed quite plausible then that knowing the rules of the game, and again, I'm quoting Howard and Mayton, by recognizing the code matches and the code clashes, and also acknowledging the disciplinary knowledge structure in the design of the professional development programs, this could enhance participation. And even more exciting for me was the possibility of a code drift, where relations are strengthened or weakened, or even the possibility of a code shift, such as a shift from a knowledge code to an elite code, comprising both the legitimate code and the legitimate disposition, for example. So to conclude, the findings of my doctoral study suggested that the design of digital technologies related academic professional development programs for the universities of technologies could therefore provide both the procedural knowledge of educationally relevant software applications, which are ER+, and pedagogy knowledge, and a pedagogical knowledge rather, which are SR+. Together, these two academic professional development program components may be seen as an elite code. So this was exciting, and also the possibility of sequencing came about, that in designing the academic professional development programs, these components could be sequenced in a manner that prioritized and begins with the interaction, or begins the interaction that matches or has in that matches the component of the discipline to provide a code matching engagement at first, so thereby earning trust and legitimacy. And we could then follow up with the code clashing component of the academic professional development program, and if possible, initiate a code drift or a code shift, and possibly move towards the elite code. And of course, we were hoping that there would be less resistance to, or less reluctance to participate in programs of the sort. Of course, this was pre-COVID, and so for me, it's going to be interesting to take this to the next step now. What happens in the post-COVID, or in this current period, rather? I wouldn't dare to say post-COVID yet. So for me, here's to continued exploration, looking at gazes in the 4K model, and maybe even LCT4. But a special thanks once more to Shoba and Lee for reawakening my interest. Thank you so much. I'm happy to take questions as well. Shoba, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Gita. It is very interesting, and you know, as a people-centered university, that your research speaks to responding to the people where they are, you know, and being cognizant of how we might not alienate colleagues or students, but rather meet them where they are, so that we bring things into conversation with each other rather than in an alienating space. So that's very interesting. It also talks to comments made in the sessions earlier on about, you know, after you come to the point of a revelation that this is a whatever, you know, a particular gaze is dominant, or this field is legitimated by a particular gaze, then so what? What does that mean? And it's very good that you actually shared with us what that means and how it's impacting on practice. I'm going to open, we've got like 4 minutes or 3 minutes for this segment. And I'm just going to ask colleagues if there's anybody who would like to share with us any what the fudge moments. I can see a lot of aha moments, but did you have like what the fudge moment or what the or wow revelations that you'd also like to share with us, or any comments you'd like to make or any suggestions? We're very keen on improving our practice, and that's why we're exposing our practice. So colleagues, while you think through that, I'm going to ask my newest baby. This LCT conference has actually given birth to a new colleague or student or who's very interested, having been part of or just listening into the LCT conference. So Nkanyezi is an intern at the Durban University of Technology. I'm a mentor, and she's really blown me away about her reflections and her journey just in this conference. So over to you, Nkanyezi. Welcome.
Thank you, and good day, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I am Nkanyezi, and I am an intern. I'm very new here, and this is my very first LCT conference, and even learning about LCT in general. And I would like to quote Karen. She said this morning, earlier today, that LCT actually exposes us to different kinds of knowers, knowledge, and perceptions. And I have been exposed, and I'm actually now looking forward to my journey, my master's journey, because I am somehow enlightened. I know a lot now, and I'm looking forward to actually learning more and being part of the next conference. And I remember when I started my internship, I walked into Shoba's office. I saw a book titled Success for Dummies. And I'm like, I'm actually gonna learn a few things here and there. And now I am here, and I don't think I need that book anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, Nkanyezi. Shabnam, are there any comments in the chat? Colleagues, is there anybody who would like to share? Lee, are you still there? Would you like to share with us?
Hi, yes, I am here. This is just such an exciting session here for me, and such a delightful session, because LCT is not just about the knowledge. It's also about knowers. It's also about community. It's also about seeing how people have, journeys have opened up, possibilities have opened up. And so, yeah, I'm just sitting here, just smiling.
Thank you so much, Lee, and thank you for your support in support of our ideas and support in helping us implement our ideas. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we're on to 4 o'clock now. So I'm going to be the school teacher and go straight into the next session as per our time. And